Tonight we explore what happens when help arrives at your door, but carries something darker in its hands. Something patient, something that has been watching for much longer than you realize. Before we begin, if you enjoy atmospheric horror that crawls under your skin and makes you question the kindness of strangers, consider subscribing. It helps us bring you more stories like this. Let me know in the comments, have you ever felt watched by someone who claimed they were protecting you? Have you ever wondered if the person helping you had other plans all along? Now, settle in, turn down the lights, check your locks one more time, and let me tell you about the neighbor who taught Rachel Torres that some saviors are more dangerous than the threats they claim to protect you from. Rachel Torres arrived at the duplex on Sycamore Drive 3 weeks after the divorce papers were finalized, when her savings account had exactly $1,200 left in it, and when starting over felt less like hope and more like survival. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, affordable in that particular way that meant no one asked too many questions. The landlord handed her the keys without meeting her eyes, mentioned something about keeping the porch light on at night, and left before she could ask why. Her neighbor introduced himself that first evening, appearing at her door with a casserole dish, still warm from the oven, his smile gentle, his eyes pale blue and steady. "Martin Voss," he said, extending a hand calloused from years of carpentry work. "Retired now, living alone since his wife passed. Happy to help if she ever needed anything." The casserole was chicken and rice, perfectly seasoned, and Rachel ate it alone in her empty kitchen, grateful for the kindness of strangers. The break-in happened 11 days later, though Rachel would later realize it was not a break-in at all. It was an invitation. She came home from her evening shift at the diner to find the back window shattered, glass scattered across the kitchen linoleum like jagged stars. Her laptop was gone, the cheap one she'd been using to search for better jobs. Her jewelry box, containing nothing valuable except her grandmother's locket, had been rifled through and abandoned. The police came, filed a report with the mechanical efficiency of people who had seen this 100 times before, and suggested she install better locks. Maybe a security system if she could afford it. Martin appeared within the hour, concern creasing his weathered face, offering to board up the window until she could get it properly fixed. He worked quickly, competently, his movements practiced and sure. When he finished, he mentioned that his nephew ran a small security company, very affordable, very discreet. He could give her a good deal, family rates. Rachel, exhausted and afraid and grateful for someone who cared, agreed. The cameras were installed 2 days later, small black devices mounted at her front door, back entrance, and bedroom window. Martin's nephew, a quiet man named Dylan with averted eyes and nervous hands, worked in silence while Martin supervised, explaining each camera's function with the patience of a teacher. Motion activated, high definition, live feed accessible through an app on her phone. Rachel could watch her own home from anywhere, he said, and she felt safer already, knowing someone was looking out for her. She did not notice at first how Martin began to know things he should not know. How he mentioned she had come home late on Thursday, must have been a long shift. How he asked if she was sleeping better now, after those restless nights last week when she had paced her living room at 2 in the morning. How he suggested she eat more, she was looking thin. Had she skipped dinner? Again? The awareness came slowly, like cold water rising. Rachel began to test him, changing her routines, covering the bedroom camera with a towel. Martin mentioned the towel the next morning, casual and light. Said she should not block the camera. It defeated the purpose of security. When she asked how he knew, he smiled, tapped his phone. The app, remember? He could check her feeds too, just to make sure everything was safe. She had authorized it during installation. Had she not read the terms? She had not read the terms. That night, Rachel searched for Dylan's security company online and found nothing. No website, no business license, no reviews. She searched Martin Voss and found a gap, a man who appeared in public records only 5 years ago, fully formed, with no history before that. She searched her own address and found 3 previous tenants, all single women, All moved out within 6 months. One had filed a restraining order that was later withdrawn. Another had simply vanished, her belongings left behind. Rachel found the other cameras the next day, the ones that had been installed long before Dylan arrived. Tiny lenses hidden in air vents behind picture frame corners that had been there when she moved in, inside the light fixture above her bed. Someone had been watching this apartment for years, learning patterns, studying routines, waiting for the right kind of tenant. The kind who was alone, vulnerable, grateful for kindness. The kind who would not question a helpful neighbor. She called the police and they came, but when they searched, the hidden cameras were gone, the ceiling unmarked, the air vents clean. Martin stood in her doorway, concern and confusion on his face, suggesting gently that perhaps the stress of the divorce, the break-in, the fear, maybe she was seeing things that were not there. The officers exchanged glances, the kind that said they had heard this before, from women who could not prove what they knew was true. That night, Rachel sat in her car outside a 24-hour diner, scrolling through her phone, searching for the previous tenant who had vanished. She found her on a missing persons forum. Melissa Carr, 28, last seen 6 years ago, at the Sycamore Drive duplex. The comments below were from other women, each one telling similar stories: kind neighbors, security systems, surveillance that turned into suffocation. Some had escaped, some had not. One comment, posted 3 months ago, said simply, "He makes you need him, and then he makes you disappear." Rachel drove to the police station and gave them everything: the forum posts, the addresses, the pattern of women who had lived at Sycamore Drive and vanished or fled. The detective, a tired woman named Santos, listened with the expression of someone who had seen the limits of evidence. "We will investigate," she said, "but without proof, without cameras, without witnesses, there was only so much they could do." Rachel returned to the duplex and found Martin waiting on her porch, patient and still, his pale eyes reflecting the streetlight. He did not threaten, he did not yell. He simply smiled and said she had been gone a long time. He had been worried. He suggested they talk inside, where it was safe, where the cameras could keep watch. She noticed Dylan's van parked across the street, engine running, waiting. She did not go inside. Instead, she drove to her sister's house 3 states away and did not tell anyone where she was going. She left her phone behind, the one with the security app, the one Martin could track. She left her clothes, her furniture, her grandmother's locket. She left everything except the flash drive hidden in her pocket, the one containing screenshots, forum posts, patterns of missing women. Detective Santos called her 2 weeks later, her voice careful and measured. They had searched the duplex and found nothing. No hidden cameras, no evidence of surveillance. Martin Voss had filed a missing persons report, concerned about his neighbor who had disappeared without a word, who had seemed increasingly unstable. The landlord confirmed she had abandoned the lease. The case was closed. But Santos said something else, quiet and off the record. 3 other women had come forward after Rachel's report, each one with stories of helpful neighbors, security systems, surveillance that became entrapment. Each one had escaped, but could not prove what had happened. The pattern was there, clear and undeniable, but patterns were not evidence. Martin Voss had no criminal record, no complaints, no proof of wrongdoing. He had been a good neighbor, a concerned citizen, a man who simply tried to help. Rachel hangs up the phone and stares at her sister's guest room ceiling, knowing Martin is still there, still watching his cameras, still waiting for the next tenant, who will arrive alone and afraid and grateful for kindness. She knows he will do it again because men like Martin always do, because the system protects helpful neighbors more than it protects the women they help. She has uploaded everything to victim advocacy sites, anonymous forums, true crime blogs, places where women warn other women about dangers the law cannot touch. She has done what she can, said what needs to be said. But late at night, when she hears a car door close outside her sister's house, when she sees a pale blue sedan slow down on their street, when she feels the weight of eyes she cannot see, Rachel understands something fundamental about predators who wear the mask of protectors. They do not stop when you escape. They simply wait for you to feel safe again, and then they remind you that safety was only ever an illusion they allowed you to believe. The duplex on Sycamore Drive has a new tenant now, a young woman who moved in last week, who accepted Martin's casserole with a grateful smile, who agreed to install security cameras after her car was vandalized in the driveway. The cycle continues because it always does, because helpful neighbors are never questioned, and women who speak up are rarely believed. And somewhere, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, Martin Voss reviews his camera feeds, patient and careful, already learning her patterns, already planning his next act of kindness. Because the most dangerous monsters are not the ones who break down doors. They are the ones who hand you the keys, install the locks, and convince you that your cage is called safety. Jennifer Torres had been home from the hospital for 3 days when the doorbell rang. She had not been expecting anyone, but the surgery had left her foggy, disconnected, and she thought perhaps she had forgotten. The recovery was harder than the doctors promised. Gallbladder removal, they said, routine, simple. You will be fine in a week. But the pain was worse than before, sharper, and the medication made time slip and blur like oil on water. She opened the door slowly, carefully, one hand braced against the frame. The woman standing on her porch smiled, warm, professional, perfect. Mid-40s perhaps, neat dark hair pulled back. Navy blue scrubs, a medical bag in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She looked exactly like someone who belonged there. "Miss Torres," the woman said, her voice smooth, practiced. "I am Ellen from Cascade Home Health. Your insurance company sent me to check on your recovery. May I come in?" Jennifer hesitated, just for a moment. She had not requested home health services. But the hospital had mentioned something, perhaps, something about follow-up care, and her memory was unreliable lately, slippery. She stepped aside. "Of course," Jennifer said. "Please, come in." That was her first mistake. Ellen moved through the doorway with a kind of easy confidence, like she had been there before, like she already knew the layout of the house. She set her bag down on the kitchen table, pulled out a blood pressure cuff, a thermometer, a clipboard thick with forms. "Let us get you comfortable," Ellen said, gesturing toward the couch. "This will not take long." Jennifer sat, and Ellen knelt beside her, wrapping the cuff around her arm. The touch was gentle, clinical, but something about it felt wrong. Too lingering, too deliberate. And then Jennifer smelled it. Not antiseptic, not the clean, sterile scent of a hospital. Something else, something underneath. Damp earth, cold and organic, like soil turned over after rain. And beneath that, faint but unmistakable, the sharp chemical tang of formaldehyde. Jennifer pulled her arm back just slightly. Are you wearing perfume?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light, casual. Ellen smiled, did not answer. Just wrapped the cuff tighter. "Your blood pressure is elevated," Ellen said after a moment. "Stress, most likely. Are you sleeping well?" "Not really," Jennifer admitted. "The pain keeps me up." Ellen said, making a note on her clipboard. "I will adjust your medication. You need rest, Jennifer. Deep, uninterrupted rest." She said it like a promise, like a threat. Over the next 2 hours, Ellen moved through the house with practiced ease. She checked Jennifer's incision, asked questions about her pain levels, her diet, her support system. Did she have family nearby? Friends who checked in? Anyone who knew she was alone? Jennifer answered honestly, because she was tired, because the medication made her tongue loose. No family. No close friends. Just her, recovering, isolated, in a rental house 20 miles outside Eugene, Oregon. Surrounded by forest. Surrounded by silence. Ellen nodded, wrote it all down. "You are doing well," she said finally, packing up her bag. "But I will need to come back tomorrow, just to monitor your progress." "Same time, does that work?" Jennifer wanted to say no. Something in her gut twisted, screamed, told her to refuse. But she was in pain. She was alone. And Ellen was professional, credentialed, sent by her insurance company. What reason did she have to refuse? "Sure," Jennifer said. "Tomorrow is fine." Ellen smiled, that same warm, perfect smile, and left. That night Jennifer could not sleep. Not because of the pain, though it was there, throbbing and insistent, but because of the smell. It lingered in the house, that damp earth scent, that chemical undertone. She checked the windows, the doors, all locked. She checked her phone, battery low but functional. She thought about calling someone, but who? And what would she say? The nurse smelled wrong. She took her medication and drifted into a half-sleep, restless, dream-soaked. When she woke, it was still dark. 3 in the morning, according to the clock. And she was not alone. Ellen was standing at the foot of her bed, silent, still, watching. Jennifer tried to scream, but her voice came out strangled, weak. The medication, she realized. Ellen had changed the dosage. Her limbs felt distant, unresponsive. "Shh," Ellen whispered, stepping closer. "You are safe, Jennifer. I am here to help." But her smile was wrong now, too wide, too knowing. And her eyes, in the darkness, looked like deep still water. Empty. Patient. Who are you?" Jennifer managed. Ellen tilted her head, considering. "I am exactly who I said I was, Jennifer. A caregiver. I care for women like you, women who are alone, women who are vulnerable, women no one will miss, and I take very good care of them." Jennifer tried to move, to reach for her phone, but Ellen was faster. She plucked it from the nightstand, turned it off, slipped it into her pocket. "You are not the first," Ellen continued, her voice soft, almost tender. "There have been others, so many others. The service sends me to women recovering from surgery, women living alone, women whose insurance companies are happy to pay for home visits, but never check to see if those visits are real. No one checks, Jennifer." Jennifer's vision blurred, tears and medication and terror. "Please," she whispered. "Please do not." Ellen knelt beside the bed, close enough that Jennifer could smell her again, that earth scent, that chemical preservation. Close enough to see the faint line of dark soil beneath her fingernails. "I need you to understand," Ellen said quietly. "This is not cruelty. This is necessity. I have learned over the years that fear, that desperation, it has a flavor, a richness. And women like you, women who are trying so hard to heal, to survive, you are ripe with it. I can taste it in the air around you." Jennifer felt herself fading, slipping under. The room tilted, blurred. "When they find you," Ellen whispered, "they will say it was complications from surgery, infection, perhaps, or a reaction to medication. They will say you were alone, that no one was there to help. And they will be right, Jennifer, because I was never here at all." The darkness closed in, thick, suffocating. Jennifer tried to fight, tried to hold on, but her body betrayed her, heavy, numb, surrendering. The last thing she heard was Ellen humming, low and rhythmic, a lullaby for the dying. Jennifer Torres was found 4 days later by her landlord, who had come to collect rent. The official report listed cause of death as post-surgical infection, complicated by medication error. No foul play suspected. No signs of struggle. Just another woman, alone, who did not survive recovery. The insurance company processed a claim for home health services without question. Cascade Home Health received payment for 6 visits. When investigators later tried to contact the company, they found no record of its existence. No business license. No employees named Ellen. just a disconnected phone number and a website that had been scrubbed clean. But in rural towns across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California, other women have reported similar visits. A calm, professional caregiver who arrives unannounced, who smells like earth and chemicals, who asks too many questions about isolation, about loneliness, about who would notice if they disappeared. Most of them survive the visit. Some do not. And every few months, another woman recovering from surgery, living alone, miles from help, receives a call from her insurance company. They are sending someone to check on her. A home health visitor. Professional, credentialed, highly recommended. They tell her not to worry, that she is in good hands. They tell her the caregiver's name is Ellen. We are taught from childhood to trust uniforms, credentials, titles. We are taught that caregivers are safe, that medical professionals are there to help, and most of them are. But what happens when that trust is weaponized? What happens when predators learn to wear the costume of compassion? Jennifer Torres learned too late that some monsters do not hide in shadows. They knock on your door with a smile and a clipboard. They take your blood pressure and ask how you are sleeping. They move through your home like they belong there, because we have been conditioned to let them in. The scariest thing about this story is not the supernatural, not the unexplained. It is the possibility, the plausibility, the ease with which it could happen. Because somewhere right now, there is a woman alone, recovering, vulnerable. And somewhere, there is someone watching, waiting, preparing to offer help she did not ask for. So, I will ask you again, have you ever felt unsafe with someone who was supposed to help you? Have you ever ignored a warning because you were too desperate to listen? If you have, you are not alone. And if you have not, consider yourself fortunate. Because for some women, the thing they feared most was not the surgery, not the pain, not the recovery. It was the knock on the door, and the voice that said, "I am here to help." What happens when the people meant to help you are the ones you should fear most? Before we begin, if you enjoy our horror stories, that lingers long after the story ends. Consider subscribing. It helps us create more stories that will haunt your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever accepted help from a stranger and felt that cold realization that something was terribly, irrecoverably wrong? Now, let me tell you about the roadside assistance program that Elena Voss wishes she had never ever called. Elena Voss had been driving the I-40 corridor for 16 years, and she knew the rhythm of the highway like a heartbeat. The diesel hum, the white lines blurring into meditation, the CB chatter that kept the loneliness at bay. She knew which rest stops had clean showers, which truck stops watered down the coffee, which stretches of road felt wrong even in daylight. Mile marker 247, just east of Flagstaff, had always felt wrong. It was 3 in the morning when her rig started losing power. Not sudden, not dramatic, just a slow, inevitable drain that forced her to coast onto the shoulder. The engine died with a mechanical sigh, and the silence that followed was absolute. No other vehicles. No lights except her hazards, blinking like a wounded heartbeat into the desert darkness. She tried the ignition. Nothing. Tried her phone. No signal, of course. This stretch was notorious for dead zones. She sat in the cab, weighing her options when she saw the sign she had never noticed before. A reflective placard, 20 feet ahead, catching her hazard lights. Mercy Station, roadside assistance, 1.2 miles ahead. 24/7, help when you need it most. Elena stared at it. 16 years on this route, and she had never seen that sign. But exhaustion and desperation have a way of making people ignore their instincts. She grabbed her flashlight, locked the cab, and started walking. The desert air was cold, crystalline, pressing against her skin like something with weight. Her boots crunched on gravel. Somewhere in the darkness a coyote called, long and mournful, and the sound felt like a warning she chose not to hear. The Mercy station appeared gradually, emerging from the darkness like something that had always been there, waiting. A converted gas station, lights glowing warm and yellow through frosted windows. A single vehicle in the lot, a white van with faded lettering, Mercy Mobile Services, helping travelers since 1987. 38 years, Elena thought. That was a long time to operate a roadside assistance program. That should have been reassuring. It was not. The building smelled wrong when she stepped inside. Antiseptic, sharp, invasive, like a hospital trying to cover something organic beneath. The lobby was clean, almost sterile, with motivational posters on the walls. You are not alone. Help is here. We see you. Behind the desk sat a man in his 60s, silver-haired, calm, wearing a polo shirt embroidered with the Mercy Station logo. His smile was practiced, professional, the kind that should have been comforting. "Welcome," he said, his voice smooth as ice over deep water. "You look like you have had a very long night. How can we help you?" Elena explained. Her truck, the dead engine, no phone signal, just needed a tow or a jump. The man, his name tag read Walter, nodded along, making notes on a clipboard. "We can absolutely help you," Walter said. "But at this hour our mobile unit is out on another call. You are welcome to wait here. We have a rest area in back, hot coffee, comfortable seating. Should not be more than an hour, maybe 2. 2 hours. Elena hesitated. But the alternative was walking back to her rig, sitting in the dark cab, waiting for daylight. And there was something about Walter's calm certainty that made refusal feel unreasonable. "Sure," she said. "I will wait." Walter stood, gestured toward a door behind the desk. "Right through here. Make yourself comfortable." The rest area was not what she expected. It was too large, for one thing, stretching back farther than the building's exterior suggested. The walls were lined with old photographs, dozens of them, travelers posing beside Mercy Station vehicles, mechanics with grease-stained hands, smiling drivers holding certificates. Traveler of the Month. Mercy Station saved my life. Elena moved closer, studying the faces. They all looked the same, not in features, but in expression. Empty, compliant, surrendered, like they were smiling because someone had told them to, and they no longer remembered how to refuse. In the corner, a coffee maker burbled, the sound too loud in the oppressive silence. Elena poured a cup, the liquid dark and bitter, and sat in one of the chairs. The fabric was worn, stained in places she tried not to examine too closely. She checked her phone again. Still no signal. That was when she noticed the door. Heavy. Industrial. The kind you would see in a freezer or a vault. It was partially open, just a crack, and from the gap came a sound she could not quite identify. Rhythmic, mechanical, punctuated by something wet and organic. She stood, coffee forgotten, and walked toward it. Every instinct screamed to stay seated, to wait for the tow truck, to leave this place immediately. But Elena Voss had spent 16 years behind the wheel, alone with her thoughts, and she had learned that ignoring wrongness only makes it grow. She pushed the door open. The room beyond was vast, far too large, stretching into shadows that swallowed her flashlight beam. Hospital beds lined the walls, 20, maybe 30, each one occupied. Women, all of them, ages ranging from 20s to 50s, hooked to IV lines, feeding tubes, monitoring equipment. Their eyes were open, but they were not awake, not really. They stared at nothing, mouths slightly parted, breathing in perfect unison. And on the wall, mounted like a trophy, a map of the western United States. Red pins clustered along the I-40 corridor, dozens of them, each one marked with a date and a name. Some pins were decades old, faded, but the most recent was dated 3 days ago. Jennifer Castillo, mile marker 247. October 14th, 2025. Elena felt her stomach drop. Jennifer Castillo had been all over the news a week ago. A missing trucker. Last seen on I-40 east of Flagstaff. Police found her rig abandoned, hazard lights still blinking. No sign of struggle. No evidence of foul play. Because she had walked to the Mercy station. You were not supposed to see that. Walter's voice came from behind her, still calm, still measured, but now carrying an edge of disappointment. Most people wait. Most people drink the coffee. It makes the transition easier. Elena turned slowly. Walter stood in the doorway, flanked by two others, younger, wearing the same polo shirts, the same empty smiles. One of them held a syringe. This is a service, you understand, Walter continued, stepping closer. These women, they were lost, broken, discarded by the world. We give them purpose. We give them peace. And in return, they give us what we need. Which is what? Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. Medicaid fraud pays very well, Walter said simply. Chronic patients requiring round-the-clock care. The state never questions it. And when they expire, well, there are always more travelers on the I-40. Always more people who need help. Elena looked at the women in the beds, at their hollow eyes, at the tubes running from their bodies to machines that hummed and clicked with inhuman precision. She thought about the photographs in the lobby, the smiling faces, the certificates. How many of them were still here, suspended in this nightmare? She thought about her rig, deliberately disabled. She thought about the sign that appeared only when needed. She thought about Walter's practiced calm, the way he spoke about human beings like livestock. And she thought about the knife in her boot. Elena moved faster than Walter expected. She was not young, but 16 years of hauling freight builds a kind of practical strength. The knife came up, found the closest man's shoulder, and she was out the door before he finished screaming. The lobby was empty. She ran for the front entrance, hit the door at full speed, and burst into the desert night. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She ran toward the highway, toward any sign of life, toward anything that was not the Mercy station. Headlights appeared in the distance. A patrol car. Elena stumbled into the road, waving her arms, sobbing with relief as the vehicle stopped. The officer who stepped out was young, professional, concerned. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Elena told him everything. The station, the women, Walter, the map, the decades of disappearances. The officer listened, radioed for backup, and followed her back to the Mercy station. They found nothing. The building was empty, gutted, long abandoned. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, no electricity, no equipment, no women in beds. The officer's flashlight swept across emptiness. "Ma'am," he said gently, "there is nothing here. Has not been for years. But I was just..." Elena stopped. The lobby where she had stood. The rest area. The door. All gone. Just bare concrete and decay. "You have been through a trauma," the officer said. "Exhaustion, maybe dehydration. Let us get you checked out." They found her rig exactly where she left it. Engine started on the first try. No mechanical issues. No reason for it to have died. Elena drove east toward Amarillo as the sun rose behind her. She told herself it was hallucination, breakdown, exposure. But 3 days later, she saw the news report. Another missing trucker. Female 42, last seen on I-40 east of Flagstaff. Rig found abandoned, hazard lights blinking. No sign of struggle. Mile marker, 247. Elena picked up her phone, tried to call the police, to warn them, to tell them to search harder, to look for the station that was not there. But who would believe her? The officer had found nothing. The building was abandoned. And if she pushed too hard, if she made too much noise, would Walter come for her? Would she wake up one night in a hospital bed, tubes running from her body, staring at nothing while machines clicked and hummed? She changed her route after that. Avoided the I-40 entirely. But she knows, deep in her bones, that the Mercy Station is still there, still helping travelers, still offering rest and coffee and comfort to women whose rigs mysteriously die at mile marker 247, still harvesting. And she knows that somewhere, in a building that should not exist, women are breathing in perfect unison, their eyes open and empty, while Medicaid checks are cashed and red pins accumulate on a map. Some horrors do not end. They simply wait for the next breakdown, the next desperate traveler, the next woman who trusts that help is exactly what it claims to be. Elena drives through the night now, always moving, never stopping unless she has to. And when she passes rest stops and service stations, she looks for the signs she missed before. The ones that promise mercy. The ones that glow warm and yellow in the desert darkness. The ones that should make you run. Tonight, we explore what happens when a mother's desperate search for healing leads her somewhere she can never truly leave, and when professional help becomes something far more sinister than neglect. Let me know in the comments, have you ever trusted someone with your child's well-being, only to realize too late that something was deeply, terribly wrong? Now, let me tell you about the retreat where Caroline Ashford took her daughter, and the silence she wishes she had never broken. Caroline Ashford arrived at Thornwood Sensory Retreat 3 hours before sunset, when the autumn light turned the Victorian manor into something that looked almost warm, almost welcoming, almost safe. The website had promised specialized care for traumatized children, a place where broken things could be gently, carefully mended. She believed it because she needed to, because her daughter Lily had not spoken in 7 months, and because the doctors had run out of answers that did not cost more than Caroline could afford. The gravel driveway crunched beneath her tires, too loud in the surrounding stillness. No birdsong, she noticed, though the forest pressed close on all sides. Just wind through empty branches, and somewhere, distantly, the sound of children laughing, or perhaps crying. The acoustics made it difficult to distinguish. Dr. Emmett Vale met them at the entrance, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and the kind of calm that therapists cultivate over decades. He wore soft gray clothing and spoke in low, measured tones that made Caroline feel like she was the one who needed calming. "Welcome, welcome," he said, crouching to Lily's level without touching her, respecting her space in a way that made Caroline's chest tighten with hope. "We have been expecting you, dear one. This is a quiet place. A safe place, you will see." Lily, 7 years old and hollow-eyed, said nothing. She had not said anything since the incident, the one Caroline could not bring herself to name, even in her own thoughts. The one that had left bruises that faded, but damage that did not. Dr. Vale straightened, smiled at Caroline with practiced empathy. "The intake process is simple. You will stay tonight, observe our methods, meet our staff. Tomorrow, if you are comfortable, Lily begins her program. 3 weeks, fully immersive. Most children show remarkable progress. Can I stay with her?" Caroline asked, hating the desperation in her voice. "The first week, we require separation," Dr. Vale said gently, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Attachment trauma often manifests as parental enmeshment. The children need space to rediscover their own voices. You understand." Caroline did not understand, but she nodded anyway, because the website testimonials had been glowing, because the fees were surprisingly affordable, because she had nowhere else to turn. The tour began in warm afternoon light that made everything seem reasonable. The main floor held common areas with soft furniture, walls painted in soothing blues and greens. Children sat in small groups, some playing quietly, others staring at nothing. They were too still, Caroline thought, too compliant. But traumatized children were often withdrawn, she reminded herself. That was why they were here. "Our methods focus on sensory regulation," Dr. Vale explained as they walked. "Many traumatized children become trapped in hypervigilant states. We help them find silence, true silence, where healing can begin. He led them down a hallway that felt subtly wrong, the ceiling too low, the walls too close. The temperature dropped, or perhaps Caroline imagined it. At the end of the corridor stood a heavy door, industrial-looking, out of place in the Victorian architecture. "Our sensory integration chambers," Dr. Vale said, his hand resting on the door handle. "Soundproof, light-controlled, temperature-regulated. The children spend time here, learning to sit with their fear rather than flee from it. We monitor everything: vital signs, stress responses, progress markers. It is quite safe, I assure you." Through a small window in the door, Caroline glimpsed a child-sized chair in an empty white room. Restraints dangled from the armrests, soft but unmistakable. Medical equipment lined one wall, screens and sensors and things Caroline could not identify. Are those necessary?" she asked, pointing at the restraints. "Some children hurt themselves when confronting trauma," Dr. Vale said smoothly. "We ensure their safety. Would you like to see inside?" "No," Caroline said too quickly. "No, that is, Lily would not. She does not like enclosed spaces," Dr. Vale finished. "Yes, that is in her file. Do not worry. We begin gradually. Trust is essential." That night, Caroline stayed in a guest room on the 3rd floor. The bed was comfortable, the linens crisp and clean, but she could not sleep. The manor settled around her with sounds that should have been normal: wood expanding, pipes ticking, wind against windows, but they formed a rhythm that felt deliberate, almost like breathing. At 2 a.m, she heard it, a low, sustained humming that seemed to come from below, from deep within the building's bones. Not mechanical, not quite human, something in between. And beneath it, or perhaps woven through it, the sound of crying, muffled, distant, but unmistakable. She found herself in the hallway before she consciously decided to move, bare feet on cold hardwood following the sound. The manor was darker than it should have been, emergency lights dim and space too far apart, casting long shadows that moved when she did not. The humming grew louder as she descended the main staircase. 3rd floor to 2nd, 2nd to 1st, then down again to a level that had not been on the tour, a basement accessed through a door she could have sworn was a closet earlier. The crying was clearer now, multiple voices, children's voices, rising and falling in a pattern that matched the humming. Not random, Caroline realized with growing horror. Orchestrated. She reached a corridor lined with doors identical to the sensory integration chamber she had seen. Small windows revealed white rooms, empty chairs, and then, in the 4th chamber, a child. The boy was perhaps 9, strapped into the chair, his small body rigid with terror. Sensors covered his head, his chest, his wrists. Screens beside him displayed graphs and numbers Caroline could not interpret, but she understood the rising, spiking lines, understood what they measured. The room was flooding with sound, she realized, not silence. Through the thick door she could barely hear it, but the boy's face was contorted in agony, mouth open in a scream she could not hear. The humming? It was not coming from the children. It was being done to them. "Ah," said a voice behind her. "You could not sleep." Caroline spun to find Dr. Vale in the corridor, flanked by 2 staff members she had not met during the tour. They wore medical scrubs and expressions of blank compliance, their eyes empty in a way that reminded her of the children upstairs. What are you doing to him?" Caroline managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Research," Dr. Vale said calmly, as if the word explained everything. "You see, Caroline, we have discovered something remarkable about traumatized children. Their fear responses are, how to say it, more vivid, more sustained than those of ordinary children. They have learned to hold terror, to live inside it, and we have learned to measure it, to quantify it, too." He paused, smiled gently. "To harvest it. Harvest, Caroline repeated, the word thick and wrong in her mouth. The data is invaluable, Dr. Vale continued, moving closer. Pharmaceutical companies, military applications, understanding how the human mind processes sustained fear, it is worth, well, suffice to say the grants are substantial. And the children, they hardly remember. The drugs we use, the sensory overload, it creates a dissociative state. They wake up, cry perhaps, but they do not recall. Not specifically. Just feelings. And traumatized children are already so full of feelings, who can distinguish which are new? Caroline looked again at the boy in the chair, at the screens measuring his terror in real time. Lily, she whispered. We'll begin her program tomorrow, as planned, Dr. Vale said. Unless you choose to take her home tonight. But ask yourself, Caroline, where will you go? What doctor will see her without insurance you do not have? What treatment can you afford? Here we offer help, and yes, we ask something in return, but she will feel no pain, remember nothing, and emerge if not healed, then at least processed. Is that not better than nothing? The question hung in the cold air like a hook, and Caroline felt herself caught on it, struggling against the terrible logic. She was broke, she was desperate, she was alone. The world had offered Lily no kindness. Perhaps this was the kindness the world could afford. I want to see her, Caroline said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Now. Dr. Vale studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Of course, but quietly, please. The other children are sleeping. He led her up 3 flights to a dormitory wing Caroline had not known existed. Rows of small beds held small bodies, all deeply asleep, their breathing synchronized in a way that could not be natural. Lily was in the 3rd bed, her dark hair spread across a white pillow, her face peaceful in a way Caroline had not seen in months. On the nightstand beside her bed sat a small paper cup containing 2 pills. Blue and white, innocuous looking. For sleep, Dr. Vale said. The first dose is always supervised. You may give it to her if you wish, or you may take her hand and leave. The choice, Caroline, has always been yours. Caroline looked at her daughter, at the other children, at the man who offered help with one hand and held a syringe in the other. She thought about the boy in the chair, about the graphs measuring his suffering, about the word harvest and what it meant when applied to children. She thought about her empty bank account, her maxed-out credit cards, the eviction notice waiting at home. She thought about Lily's silence, her refusal to eat, the way she flinched at sudden sounds. She thought about how the world punished poverty, how it offered only cruel choices or no choices at all. And she thought about the sound of crying from below, orchestrated and measured, valuable enough to fund a manor in the woods and a doctor's gentle smile. I need, Caroline started, then stopped. What did she need? Time, money, a different world? I need to think. Of course, Dr. Vale said. Take the night. Morning brings clarity, or so they say. I will leave you with her. He withdrew, his staff following like shadows, and Caroline was alone with her sleeping daughter in a choice that felt like drowning. She could take Lily and run. To what? Another year of struggling? Of Lily's silence growing heavier, of doors closing because money talked louder than need? Or she could stay, could let them take something invisible from her child in exchange for something as simple as meals and shelter and the pretense of care. She did not give Lily the pills. Instead, she sat beside the bed and watched her daughter sleep, listening to the synchronized breathing of harvested children, trying not to hear the humming that rose from below like a pulse. At dawn, Caroline stood at a crossroads between walls, made of desperation. She could destroy this place, call the police, fight for children who were not hers while her own child starved in the wreckage. Or she could become complicit, could accept the bargain that the world offered, traumatize children as currency, their silence for sale to the highest bidder. She chose door number 3, the one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Caroline picked up her sleeping daughter, carried her down 3 flights of stairs and out to her car as the sun broke gold across the gravel drive. No one stopped her, because Dr. Vale had told the truth. The choice had always been hers, and he knew that most mothers would not, could not, leave. But Caroline left. She drove until Thornwood Retreat was a speck in the rearview mirror, until the forest gave way to fields, until her daughter stirred and woke, still silent, but no longer in a place that measured silence in profit margins. She did not call the police. How could she, when she had no proof, when she had seen but not photographed, when Dr. Vale's lawyers would bury her beneath litigation before the first hearing? She told herself she would find another way, gather evidence, come back prepared. But she never did, because poverty has its own gravity, because every day was a battle to keep Lily fed and housed, because the world does not pause its cruelty to let you gather strength. 6 months later, Caroline saw a news article about a fire at a retreat center in rural England. Faulty wiring, they said, tragic loss of life, 12 children and 3 staff members. Dr. Emmett Vale, the sole survivor, was being treated for smoke inhalation and could not be reached for comment. The article included a photo of the children, faces blurred for privacy but shapes recognizable. The boy Caroline had seen in the chair was not among them. He had been released 2 weeks before the fire, the article noted, one of their success stories. Caroline never learned what became of him, whether he remembered the humming, whether his sleep was peaceful or full of sounds he could not name. She did not search for him, could not bear to see what her cowardice had allowed or her defiance had failed to prevent. Lily learned to speak again, slowly, painfully, without the help of specialists Caroline could not afford. Her first words after 7 months of silence were, "The walls were listening." Caroline asked what she meant, but Lily only shook her head, and the subject became another silence between them, one they have carried for 3 years now. Some nights, Caroline lies awake and wonders if Lily had heard the humming during that single night at Thornwood, if she had understood on some level what her mother almost traded her for. She wonders if Dr. Vale rebuilt somewhere else, if he is harvesting new children in a new manner with new grants and new parents too desperate to ask the right questions. She wonders how many children it takes to fund research into suffering, and what that research produces, and who benefits from the data mined from traumatized minds. But mostly, she wonders about the choice she made, the door she walked through, and whether saving 1 child while abandoning 11 makes her a hero, or a coward, or something worse. A mother who understood the price and simply refused to pay it with her own. The police never contacted her. The investigation concluded with accidental fire and condolences to the families. Dr. Vale's research grants were transferred to a new facility, she learned later, one in Scotland this time, one that specialized in sensory integration for troubled children. The brochure arrived in her mail 3 months ago, glossy and professional, with Dr. Vale's signature at the bottom. "We remember Lily," the handwritten note said. "The door remains open. Some children need more time to be ready. We are patient. We can wait." Caroline burned the brochure, but she kept the note, because she knows that door is not for Lily anymore. It is for her, for the moment when poverty wins and desperation returns, for the day when she might convince herself that some harvests are necessary, that some children must be tithed, so others can be spared. She tells herself that day will never come, but late at night, when bills pile higher than her paycheck and Lily's therapy sessions cost more than food, Caroline hears it, the humming from below, the sound of choices being measured and weighed and found wanting. And she knows that Dr. Vale is right. The door remains open, and patience is just another word for inevitability. Fear is not always a sudden thing, a shock that passes. Sometimes it is a hum that never stops, a frequency just below hearing, a vibration in the bones. Sometimes it is a door you walk past every day, knowing that desperation is patient, that poverty is relentless, and that the world measures children in data points and profit margins. And sometimes, the most terrifying realization is not that monsters exist, but that they offer real solutions to real problems, and the only thing separating you from them is a choice you might not be strong enough to keep making, day after day, forever.
Hello, my friends. Tonight, we explore what happens when healing becomes harvesting, when those who promise to mend your broken spirit are actually collecting the pieces for themselves. Before we begin, if you enjoy my horror stories that lingers long after the story ends, consider subscribing.
It helps us bring you more tales that blur the line between wellness and predation. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt like someone was taking more from you than you agreed to give? And let me tell you about the retreat that Marcus Webb wishes he had never found. This is the story of the Witches of Willow Creek.
The gravel road to Willow Creek Wellness Retreat twisted through pine forests so thick that daylight barely penetrated the canopy. Marcus Webb arrived 3 hours after sunset, when the darkness had already settled into the trees like something solid, something permanent. The website had promised transformation, renewal, a chance to, quote, release the weight of grief and reclaim your vital self, unquote. He believed it because 6 months after his wife's death, he still woke gasping from dreams where she was drowning. And he could not reach her, could not save her, could not do anything but watch. The main lodge appeared suddenly, a sprawling Victorian structure that seemed too large for the narrow clearing it occupied. Warm light spilled from tall windows, and through the glass, Marcus could see figures moving with deliberate slowness, like dancers underwater. He parked his car and stepped out into air that smelled wrong, pine needles mixed with something medicinal, sharp and invasive, like formaldehyde or preservation. 3 women waited at the entrance, silhouetted against the light. They introduced themselves as the practitioners, Iris, Rowan, and Sage, names that felt chosen rather than given. They were beautiful in the way that genuinely old paintings are beautiful. Not perfect, but somehow timeless. Iris, the eldest, had silver hair pulled back so tightly, it stretched her face into something serene and unsettling. She smiled at Marcus with teeth, too white, too even. "You are weary," Iris said, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who had spoken these words many times before. "You are searching for something you have lost. We understand. Come inside, Marcus. We have been expecting you." The lobby smelled like dried herbs and something underneath, something organic that Marcus could not name. The walls were lined with botanical prints, each plant labeled in Latin script that looked ancient, hand-drawn. Other guests sat in deep chairs by a fireplace that burned with flames too blue, too still. They looked up when Marcus entered, and their expressions were identical, serene, empty, like people who had forgotten how to want things. Rowan, younger with dark eyes that reflected no light, brought him tea in a clay cup that felt warm and slightly damp. "Drink," she said gently. "It will help you settle." The tea tasted like copper and earth, bitter and invasive. Marcus drank it anyway because he had driven 4 hours to be here, because the grief counselor had stopped returning his calls, because sleeping pills no longer worked, and he needed something, anything, to make the drowning dreams stop. "We practice the old ways here," Sage explained as she led him upstairs. Her voice was melodic, hypnotic. The ways that existed before modern medicine tried to separate body from spirit, before people forgot that healing requires sacrifice. She paused at the door to his room, her hand resting on the dark wood. "Rest tonight, Marcus. Tomorrow we begin the work of harvesting what has grown heavy inside you." The word harvesting made something cold slide down Marcus's spine, but he was too tired to question it, too desperate to be suspicious. His room was beautiful and wrong. The ceiling was too high. The walls painted a color that seemed to shift between green and gray depending on how the lamplight caught it. There were no mirrors, he noticed. Not in the bedroom, not in the attached bathroom. Just empty spaces where mirrors should have been, rectangular shadows on the wallpaper. He lay awake that first night, listening to sounds that should not exist in a wellness retreat. Low chanting from somewhere below, rhythmic and ancient. voices rising and falling in patterns that felt designed to bypass conscious thought and sink directly into the brainstem. And beneath the chanting, softer, almost imperceptible, the sound of breathing that did not match his own, as if the room itself was inhaling, exhaling, waiting. Morning arrived pale and hesitant, the kind of dawn that never quite commits to full daylight. Breakfast was served in a dining room where 13 other guests sat at a long table, silent, eating slowly. Marcus recognized the man across from him, someone he had seen in the lobby the night before. But the man looked different now, older somehow, though less than 12 hours had passed. His skin had taken on a grayish quality, and his hands trembled slightly as he lifted his spoon. "The first ritual is tonight," Iris announced from the head of the table. "We will gather in the root cellar after sunset. You will each bring something personal, something that carries the weight of your loss. A photograph, a letter, an object that holds memory. We will teach you how to release it, how to let us carry the burden for you." The other guests nodded with synchronized acceptance, their movements eerily similar, like puppets operated by the same hand. Marcus felt the wrongness spreading through him like cold water, but when he opened his mouth to object, to question, to demand answers, the words dissolved before they could form. The tea, he realized. Something in the tea. That afternoon, while the practitioners led a meditation session in the garden, Marcus explored the lodge. The architecture made no sense, hallways that doubled back on themselves, staircases that led to blank walls, doors that opened onto other doors. He found a library on the 3rd floor, shelves crammed with leather-bound books, their spines unmarked. He pulled one down and opened it to find handwritten entries, dates going back 200 years. May 17th, 1847. Subject 12 shows optimal ripeness, vitality extraction, 93%. Subject will be maintained in compliant state for 6 additional days before final harvesting. Note: the fear enhances quality.
Recommend extended disorientation protocols.
Marcus's hands shook as he turned pages, finding entry after entry, descriptions of processes that sounded like agriculture applied to human consciousness. Harvesting, cultivation, ripeness, extraction. And at the back of the book a list of names, hundreds of them, with dates and percentages, efficiency ratings for something that should not have ratings. He heard footsteps in the hallway outside, slow and deliberate, and quickly replaced the book. When he turned, Rowan stood in the doorway, watching him with eyes that held no curiosity, only patience. "You found the records," she said simply. "That happens sometimes. The curious ones always find them. It does not matter. By tomorrow you will understand, or you will be too changed to care. What are you doing here?" Marcus's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "What is this place?" Rowan smiled, and the expression was almost kind. "We are practitioners of the old art, Marcus. The art that your ancestors called witchcraft, before that word became a symbol of fear and persecution. We do not cast spells or brew potions in the fairy tale sense. We do something far more practical. We harvest vitality itself, life force, the energy that sustains consciousness. We collect it from those who have too much,
Those drowning in grief and trauma and pain, and we sustain ourselves with it. It is an exchange, really. We take your suffering, and in return, you become peaceful, unburdened, empty."
"You are killing people," Marcus said, though the words felt inadequate for what he was beginning to understand. "Not killing," Rowan corrected gently. "Transforming. The guests who leave here are alive, functional, capable of basic existence. They simply no longer want anything, no longer feel deeply, no longer suffer. Some would call that a mercy. We call it harvesting. And tonight, Marcus, you will understand why so many come here willingly, why they return year after year until there is nothing left to harvest.
Until they are hollow, compliant shells that we release back into the world."
She stepped closer, and Marcus could smell that same medicinal sharpness, formaldehyde and preservation. You came here seeking release from grief, from the dreams that drown you. We can give you that release. All you have to do is stop resisting, stop questioning, surrender to the process. Marcus ran. He stumbled down staircases that seemed to shift beneath his feet, through hallways that stretched impossibly long. Behind him he heard no pursuit, only that same low chanting rising from the depths of the lodge, voices calling him back, promising peace, promising emptiness, promising an end of the drowning dreams. He reached the front door and threw it open, gasping, desperate, only to find that his car was gone. The gravel clearing was empty except for 13 other vehicles, all with deflated tires, all rendered immobile. The forest pressed close, dark and watchful, and Marcus understood with sick certainty that there was no easy escape, no simple flight. The ritual would happen tonight, whether he participated willingly or not. And after tonight, he would be like the others, hollow-eyed and compliant, drained of everything that made him himself, harvested clean. He returned to the lodge because there was nowhere else to go. The practitioners waited in the root cellar, a subterranean space that smelled like earth and decay, and something underneath, something old and patient and hungry. The 13 other guests stood in a circle, each holding their personal objects, photographs and letters and wedding rings, tokens of love and loss. Iris gestured for Marcus to join the circle. "Bring your grief to the center," she instructed. "Place it on the altar. Let us absorb it, transform it, release you from its weight." Marcus stepped forward not because he wanted to, but because something in the tea, in the air, in the very architecture of this place was pulling him, compelling him. He reached the stone altar and placed his hands on its surface, feeling it pulse with something that was not quite warmth, not quite life. And then he understood. The altar was not stone. It was compressed vitality, centuries of harvested consciousness crystallized into something solid, something that fed the practitioners, sustained them, kept them ageless and powerful and eternally hungry. He thought of his wife, of the drowning dreams, of the grief counselor who had stopped returning his calls. He thought of all the ways modern society monetized suffering, packaged healing, sold transformation. And he realized that what the practitioners were doing was simply the logical conclusion, the ultimate commodification of human pain. "I will not," Marcus said, though his voice shook with the effort of resistance. "I will not give you this." Iris tilted her head, considering him with those ancient, patient eyes. "Then you will leave here unchanged, still drowning, still suffering. Or you will resist until the harvest takes you anyway, slowly, painfully, over many nights. The choice is yours, Marcus. But everyone who comes here eventually surrenders. Everyone empties eventually." Marcus backed away from the altar, his hands trembling. The other guests watched him with hollow expressions, already lost, already harvested. He thought about running again, about fighting, about calling the police, though he knew his phone had not worked since he arrived, knew that the outside world felt impossibly distant, unreachable. He thought about surrender, about peace, about never dreaming of drowning again. And then he made his choice. Marcus fled into the forest, branches tearing at his clothes, roots catching at his feet. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out, until he collapsed in a clearing where moonlight filtered through the canopy like water, like drowning, like everything he was trying to escape. When dawn finally came, he found a road. A trucker picked him up, drove him to the nearest town, listened to his incoherent story with the patient skepticism of someone who had heard strange things before. The police investigated, found nothing at the coordinates Marcus provided, no lodge, no practitioners, no other guests. They said he had experienced a breakdown, exposure-induced hallucinations, acute grief manifesting as paranoid delusion. Marcus returned to his apartment, to his job, to the ordinary rhythms of ordinary life. The drowning dreams continued, but he told himself that was better than the alternative, better than becoming hollow, better than being harvested clean. But sometimes, late at night, he caught himself feeling lighter, less burdened, as if something inside him had been reduced, refined, taken. He would stand before his bathroom mirror and study his own face, searching for signs of hollowness, looking for evidence that he had not truly escaped, that the harvest had begun the moment he drank that copper-tasting tea and was simply progressing slowly, inevitably, until the day he would wake up empty, compliant, ready to return. And 6 months after his escape, when he saw a new wellness retreat advertised online, promising transformation and renewal and release from grief, he felt something stir inside him, something that might have been curiosity or might have been compulsion. And he understood with terrible clarity that some harvests are not immediate.
Some extractions take time, and some witches are patient enough to wait for their crops to ripen, wherever they may run.
The practitioners are still out there, still harvesting, still promising peace to those who drown in grief. And Marcus Webb, who thought he escaped, who tells himself he survived, wonders every night whether the dreams that wake him gasping are memories of his wife, or something else entirely, some part of himself that is being slowly, carefully, inevitably drained away, leaving only the shell behind. Because the scariest monsters are not the ones hiding under beds. They are the ones who promise healing, who offer transformation, who ask for trust, and by the time you realize what they are harvesting, you are already too hollow to remember what you have lost.